Hi, I'm Ajaire, and I'm a Cuddle Ambassador from Shannon Fabrics. Today, I'm in the Cuddle Studio, and we're going to be making a self-binding blanket. A self-binding blanket is, you can use anything for the top. We often will use a really cute digital print like this, and then all you're doing is taking a backing with like a luxe cuddle, and you're going to bring it around to the front, creating a self-binding. So it's a really neat technique, really easy to do, and I'm going to show you all the steps you'll need in order to do it yourself. You can use this tutorial to really make any size. I'm going to walk you through that. And today we're going to make the smaller lovey size that's in our pattern. It's going to end up 16-inch center, 20-inch outer. I think the whole thing's going to end up about 18 inches. So the tools we're going to use for the self-binding blanket, we're going to use a nice ruler. This one's a large square. It doesn't have to be this large for this project, but I love my trusty square ruler, so we're going to use that today. I like to also have a mini ruler. This is just an OmniGrid 6-inch by 1-inch ruler. It's always nice to have something like that for marking. A piece of cardstock. This could be a regular piece of paper. I like cardstock because it's going to hold up a little better. Plus, once I get the measurements right for the size I'm making, and we'll talk about it in a bit, I like to be able to keep what I have as a template for later, and cardstock will hold up really nicely. We're going to be cutting some fabric today, and with Cuddle there are 3 options for cutting. We've got the regular rotary cutter, micro serrated scissors, these are the ones from Karen K. Buckley, and then an Olfa cutting knife. This is the SAC1. For this project, we're mostly going to be using the rotary cutter, but I will tell you why in some instances we'll use the knife or the serrated scissors. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to be using the clover flower head pins. The ones that come in the box like this are a little bit sturdier and they hold up really well to the thickness of a cuddle. And then we pair that with a clover magnetic pin cushion. Stretch needles, we use the 90 by 14 Schmetz needles. Cuddle is a stretch knit fabric. The backing is knitted, so you want to use a stretch needle to make sure you're not skipping any stitches or tearing the fabric at all. We also have some marking tools. We're going to be doing some marking right onto the backing of the fabric, so you're going to want a permanent felt tip marker. A Sharpie works great. Depending on the color of the backing, you may need a silver Sharpie. That works really well in those darker fabrics. It still shows up, whereas the black might not show up on something like that. We also are using our By Annie stiletto. This stiletto tool will be used to fluff up the stitches at the end, and it helps guide the fabric through the machine as we're sewing. We'll also use some Wonder Clips. I like these really large ones by Clover. That's this style here, but you can use the smaller ones as well. This is a Mettler thread. 100% polyester is the important part. We want something that is going to stand up to wear and tear of this blanket, and the Cuddle is polyester, so you're going to want to kind of use a thread that's polyester. It'll hold up really well to avoid any breaking of stitches. You're also going to use a walking foot. In this Bernina 535 that I'm using today, this is the walking foot that comes with it, or you can purchase it separately. That's what I'm going to use. Your machine may have something a little different. There's other systems for different brands, but you want something that is going to act as a walking foot and help guide the fabric through with the feed dogs on the bottom. So it's going to be a system that just doesn't create puckers for us. And then finally, we're going to be using a 505 spray. This is from O'Deef. It's a temporary adhesive and it will wash out. So we're going to use this. You're able to use this in a smaller enclosed space. You don't have to be all the way out in the outside for this. It doesn't have a super strong smell. So this is the one we love to use. And now we'll move on to how we're going to set up this project. As I mentioned, we're going to be making the lovey-sized blanket that's in the self-binding blanket pattern. So we need a 16-inch piece of digital Cuddle. This is this Teddy, really sweet digital Cuddle print in a quartz. That's the colorway. And then this is hide. So it's Luxe Cuddle Hide, and this color is called Safari. And these are both just really nice, and they go so well together. I have already cut these pieces out. So this one is already 20 inches. This one is already 16 inches. But I want to talk to you really quick about cutting so that if you haven't cut yours out already, you know what to do. For the inside piece, the teddy, it's totally fine to just cut along and use the rotary cutter, because that's going to get tucked in underneath these edges. Once we bring this fabric around, you're never going to see this edge. It'll be a little messier when you use the rotary cutter, but it's totally fine to cut that nap right off. We're not worried about it. So it's super easy to cut out whatever your inside thing is. And the inside of a self-binding quilt can be really anything that you want to feature inside, inside that little frame that the self-binding makes. The outside piece, the piece that is the backing that's going to make what I consider that frame, this is more important. This is going to be cut out with the SAC 101 knife. And the reason for that is because this is going to wrap over, and then this is a raw edge that we're going to keep raw. This is not going to fray, and that's the beauty of Cuddle, is that you can do a binding without having to turn the edge under. So because that's going to be raw, we want the natural pile of this hide to look just as it is. We do not want to cut off every single bit of that edge, and with the rotary cutter, it would cut it right off. And I'll show you really quick what that looks like. I have another piece of hide that I'll just quickly cut the 3 ways. So this is just a sample piece here, and I'll show you. We'll cut 1 row with the rotary cutter, and this is the way I wouldn't cut it for this particular project. This way. So I'm just going to use a rotary cutter and cut off a strip here. And you can see there's lots of little fluff that gets cut off, and the edge, you lose any of the hangover edge that you would have. You've lost any of that nice luxe cuddle that would hide the edge when you roll it over. So that's not the best method for this. If you were going to be hiding the edge within a seam allowance, no problem. But for this, you're going to want to either use a micro serrated scissor. Again, this is the Karen K. Buckley ones that I showed you. And what you would do is you're going to go in and you're trying to cut just the backing of the fabric. So you're trying to not cut the pile. You're just trying to go up. I'm not cutting super straight because I didn't make a line or anything, but you're trying to just cut that backing fabric, not cut off any of the pile if you can. And let's see how we did with that. So with this, we still are going to have some excess in there, and some of that's being blown over from the first cut we did, but these nice pieces will hang up and over, so when you flip that, you'll have, sorry, some of those pieces are up there, but you'll have that nice look that we like from the hide. I'm going to vacuum real quick just to kind of get up some of these fibers. So now, once you've vacuumed all the stuff off, really nothing else is coming off there. So no matter what cut you use, you don't need to worry once you've vacuumed it up or gotten rid of that extra fluff. But when we use the knife, it's going to do the similar thing to the scissors, to that micro serrated scissor, and it should cut off just the backing and not the fluff. So this isn't super sharp. I haven't replaced it in a while, so I'm not pressing down real hard, but I might have to come back and just release it in a few spots. You don't want to be jamming this down and pushing super hard, because that could cut everything. If you really push it down, it'll have the same effect as the rotary cutter. You're just trying to slice the back and not disturb the fibers. You're also not jamming it in and sliding it this way. You're doing a more side to side motion and just pulling it to the side like this. And what I do is there are different clicks you can have for this. And each of these sections is a blade that can be knocked off once it's dull. What I try to do is have about 2 of those sections out, and it gives me a nice long blade that is cutting almost twice as you're cutting along. It's like the back is cutting and the front is cutting at the same time. So then with this, again, we get a little bit of the cuddle mass, but we still have that beautiful pile that comes over. And that's what we want. We want that for this project. So again, I'm gonna just vacuum that up real quick. Once we're done vacuuming, there's very little mess. Sometimes you can just give it one little shake down there. Same thing, little shake. But then there's not gonna be any mess that ends up in your machine. And you'll have this nice edge that you can then use for the project. So we're not going to be cutting ours today because I've already cut it, but that just gives you a little overview of how to cut. If you want to look more into how you're cutting Cuddle and some tips and tricks, you can find more of our Cuddle Studio videos to go into greater detail. So what we're going to do for this is we're trying to make a mitered corner here. And we want 1.5 inch border for this project. And so in order to get the miters in the corner, we use a template. So you're gonna take your piece of cardstock, and what we're doing is making a template. For this project, we want 1.5 inch borders. It's nice for the lovey size to use something a little smaller. If you wanted something bigger, like a 2 inch, sometimes you'd maybe want a 3 inch on a bigger project, you would just change your measurement from the 1.5 inch we're using to whatever the width of the border you want. So we're going to use our ruler. This is one of these Omni grids that folds out. It's kind of nice. We're going to use 1.5 inch measurement from the edge and just draw a line down to the edge. And then turn the piece of cardstock, and we'll use 1.5 inches again. So now we'll find the 45-degree angle on your ruler. Every ruler has it in a different place. This one's right here. So I'm going to line my 45-degree up with this tail of the line that I made there until the 2 lines intersect. So where these 2 lines intersect here, now I'm going to draw a line that goes all the way around. And I'm using this thin, it's called ultra fine point Sharpie. I'm using this one because it does give a little bit of a thinner line. You could use the big fat Sharpie if you wanted to, or just a regular pen. I just have this on hand. I do like using these to do some markings sometimes on Cuddle because it is a little thinner. So now we have this template drawn out, and this is the line, this diagonal line that we just drew is where we're going to cut. Now remember, this was 1.5 inches, this was 1.5 inches, this is the line that we're going to cut. So we're using our non-fabric scissors. You want to not cut your card template out with the beautiful Karen K. Buckley micro serrated scissors. So find an old pair of scissors and you're going to cut this out. Now this template here is all we need now for this project. I'm going to write 1.5 on it. You can then reuse this template whenever you're wanting to do a self-binding blanket with a 1.5 inch border. So this is how we're going to use it. We're going to take our backing fabric. This is the one we already cut with the blade to 20 by 20. So now what we're going to do is we will place this into a corner and we're going to trace a line onto the fabric. I'm going to use that ultra fine point marker, but you can use any permanent felt tip marker. If you have a darker fabric, as I mentioned before, the silver Sharpie works great. I just like how the fine point of this, you really can see just the exact line you're trying to do. And you're going to do this all the way around. Right now, you're not worrying about the nap direction on the front of this backing piece at all. You're just marking every side exactly the same. So let's mark all the way around to all 4 corners. Oops. Sometimes it helps if you mark from the center out to the edge. Gonna do that or that. And these markers are not going to show through to the front. It's perfectly fine to do it this way. However, if you are having a very light fabric, like if you're using a natural or something like that, you may want to be careful. You see here where that black Sharpie marker line that I did for cutting this out originally? When you fold this over later, if it was super dark right there, it could potentially show here on this raw edge, depending on how well you cut it. So just be aware of that. It's not going to show on this one at all. I have no worries about it. But that's something just to keep in mind. We do often tell you, hey, just use a black Sharpie. It's not going to show through. But if you're using the raw edge, you might want to cut just to the inside of that black marker line. Like this side doesn't have any black marker lines, so you don't even have to worry about it. So that's just a little tip. All right, now we're going to stitch the outside of this to make that frame with the mitered corners. So what we're going to do is we take one corner and we're folding it up like this. So you kind of fold it into a triangle. And what you're trying to do, I actually like to do it this way. So we've got that corner folded right sides together into itself. And what I like to do is I like to take, I'm going to use my clover head pins, I like to take that corner and really make a nice point. And what we're doing is we're lining up this Sharpie line that I drew with that Sharpie line on the other side. So I like to line it up there, and then I'll put one pin here. And I just kind of look to the back, see how well those line up. They don't have to be perfect, but you do want them to look nice. You want this to have a nice sharp miter corner when you get to it. So then, once that has been nicely flattened down, what I do is I take one pin and I put it in the line, through the line, and I go to the back and I see, is that pretty close to that marking line? And you can see that it is. So then that's a great position to have this in. Now I will put one pin here and one pin here. So you're doing them on either side of that marked line that you did, because that is going to be your stitching line. Once we get this underneath the sewing machine, then I can take this pin out, start stitching, and as I'm stitching that line, I can pull this pin out. And these two will stay there to keep everything intact. So now we're ready to stitch this corner. Okay, so now we're going to sew along that line that we just mentioned. I'm using the walking foot, that 90-14 stretch needle, and on this Bernina 535, I'm going to use a straight stitch with a 3.5 millimeter length. So I can take out that first pin, and then I'm just going to stitch and back stitch a bit. I want to back stitch to the edge of the fabric, but I don't want to start on the edge of the fabric. And I'll tell you why when I'm done with this row. I'll show you what the reason is for that. So we're going to continue to stitch along this line. You can use your stiletto just to make sure everything is nice and smooth, and then you're going to back stitch to secure. Cut the thread. All right, so we've stitched that corner, and what we're going to do is just test that that miter is going to turn out okay. We're eventually going to clip this corner off to avoid some of the bulk inside the point, but let's not do that now. If we've made some sort of mistake, let's just flip it out and see how it goes first. So we've got the bulk under there, so it's not lying exactly perfectly flat, but it's a nice mitered corner there. We'll measure, we wanted a 1.5 inch border, which I can feel the line under there, that's 1.5. That one's 1.5, so our math worked out and our template's done a great job. So the reason that we didn't start stitching off the fabric here is I didn't want to make a weird knotty mess of threads, because this edge here, these raw edges are going to stay. So this corner, if it was a mess or shifted slightly, it would be noticeable. So that corner there is very important. When you're stitching this first part here, remember this edge is going to be visible. So I start on the fabric, back stitch, and then come off to this side. So what we'll do now is do the rest of these 3 corners in exactly that same way. We're just going to pull them up. We pin so that those 2 lines are meeting there, and then I make that nice point go out there so we know the fabric's in the right place. I push down and up with my pin, and I see how close to that line on the bottom I got, and it's pretty darn close. So we will put a pin on this side and a pin on this side, and we're ready to stitch. So let's go over here. We'll start on the fabric, take a couple of stitches, lock that stitch in. We are going to back stitch to the edge and then come back and just continue to stitch down on this line that we marked up, reverse the stitch and cut it. So another nice stitching line there. So I'm just going to trim this thread really quick that we started. Nice snips. And once again, we're not going to cut that off yet. I'm just going to stick my finger in there, turn it out, and check and see how it did. You can see we have 2 nice mitered corners. And I've got one down here where I've had all 4 corners already done. So I did these earlier. There you go. You can ignore this line there. I made a mark earlier when I was playing around with stuff. But we have our nice even frame all the way around, and it was measured to be 1.5. So now we're done with this part. What we need now is our cute little inner print. Here is where we need to start talking about naps. So with Luxe Cuddle and with the Cuddle 3, this is a digital Cuddle, but it has that 3mm nap just like a C3 for Cuddle. This is hide, and hide is one of those that the nap kind of goes all over the place, so it feels pretty good no matter which way you have it, but you do want to try to find which way feels the best for you when you're petting it. So I will say that is what I'm doing here is I'm just barely pulling this to see if it'll stretch. I'm not pulling it super hard, because if you do pull it super hard, it will get completely out of whack. I just want to show you really quickly. So that's across the width here. If I pull that end is going to curl. So see how that curls up? This is across the width of the fabric, not the selvage edge, and it does have a little more stretch. So if I pull that, it'll curl up. You can get it to lie down flat again. So it will go flat, but it's just nice if you don't really pull anything too hard when you're working with it, so you don't have to worry about that. But in order for me to find the edge that I want, because I didn't mark it initially, I'm just checking, because the width of the fabric will stretch slightly, but that selvage won't. So I can tell that's a selvage edge, or not a selvage edge, parallel to the selvage edge. So this isn't the selvage, this is the raw edge, but it's not stretching. Same with this, won't stretch, and then the bottom will. So we want to decide, is this the top or is this the top, and which way are we going to pet it? So that's really all we're trying to figure out here. And you could mark the fabric before you even cut it in the beginning. It's really up to you. So I'm going to say that I think that we're going to go, this is the top, this is the bottom. So I'm going to lie this here, top, bottom, and then these are the sides. Just trim this really quick. I see this weird little thing right here. There we go. All right, so now we need to do the same for this piece. And again, I didn't mark these ahead of time. When you cut them out, mark them then, and then you don't have to think about it. So that's not it. That there, see how that ripples? That is the wrong nap. So you can pet it nicely down this way. This way kind of makes a little bit of a mess. So this is the right direction. So now we want this one to be going this way. Now, because this frame is sort of turned over and upside down, technically this piece here is not going the right way, because when it's on the back, it is going the right way. But the most important thing is the backing. You want the backing to have it going like that. So we're going to just do a quick temporary fit. Make sure this piece is going to fit inside the frame. It does not have to go all the way to the edges underneath, but you want to have enough, you want to have it big enough to fit under and be able to sit nicely. If there's too much fabric under the edge, then it can get bunchy in here. So you could trim it up if you had to make it fit nicely. But for this, it's gonna do really well just like this. So once you know that your fabric is gonna fit nicely inside this frame, you kind of pull it out like this, lift it up, and we're gonna do some spray basting. We use that 505 spray, and we're gonna spray baste just on the backing, just on the digital piece. We're not gonna spray onto this, and we're gonna use some pieces of paper so that we don't make a giant mess. This stuff will wash out, but you don't wanna get it on the tops of your fabrics, because while you're stitching and everything, it can make a little bit of a sticky mess. So we're gonna use these to help prevent some of that mess. Just put a piece here. We just don't want to get the overspray onto our nice cutting mat. So we're going to put a big piece of paper underneath and put our project back on. If everything's facing the same way. I just want to control that overspray. I don't want it to get onto our cutting mat. I don't want it to get onto like that part of the upper fabric. We just really want it to get on this piece. So again, you can use this indoor. It does not have a super strong smell. And you're just going to lightly spray. Now, I'm just going to pull it across. And the nice thing about the OD 505 is that it's repositionable. So if we get this under here and we don't like how it is, we can pick it up and reposition it. So it's an adhesive, but it does reposition pretty well. So let's get that tucked under there. Make sure there's no real jam ups. Oh, you know what I'm seeing? I didn't trim those corners. Let's do that. So we've already got that little bit sprayed, but it's okay. We can just leave it like that. Let me show you really quick. We'll trim these corners up. It just eliminates some of the bulk in there. And for this, you can just go ahead and use a rotary cutter. It's going to be tucked inside. No one's ever going to see it, but it'll just get rid of some of that extra bulk in those corners. And the Cuddle fabric is already pretty nice and thick, so any bulk you can get rid of is warranted. You could use the micro-serrated scissors or something for this, but I say just use the rotary cutter and call it good. All right, so let's go back. I'm going to shake this off really quick just to make sure there aren't any fibers in our project. Turn these corners back out. You could use a point turner if you wanted to, but I find it's not necessary with this. We just kind of get your finger in there and press it out nicely. Down, and it's just gonna lie a lot flatter. So once again, now I'm just gonna make sure that That's the top, that's the bottom, these are the sides. Okay, so now we're going to take this piece. We've already sprayed the one side of it. It's sticky, but not super duper sticky. Like you can feel it, it's tacky, but it's not like gummy. So I'm just going to lie it down real quick. I'm not pressing it onto the top of this fabric. I'm just gently putting it here because I don't want to get it to stick to that and gum it all up. Put it under here. So you can see this is a really forgiving project. You can take that 505 spray and move stuff around for a while with it, which is lovely. So you can get stuff exactly where you want it before you start to actually do your stitching. All right, so that's pretty good on that side. Now I'm going to spray this side. So just lightly spray. Let's to the side. Once again, we're just going to kind of lift and press it all into place. Odif does have a mini glue stick now that they have that people use, this little 505 temporary adhesive, and that works really well too. For the self-binding blankets, I do prefer the spray because I think it just is a better application here, but really you can use whichever you prefer. So I am just going to tap this down now and really get this teddy bear piece in place. And now all we've put in place is just the center is temporarily adhered to the backing. So we still have to deal with these edges because we're going to stitch around this raw edge to secure everything in place. So what we're going to do for that is you can either use pins or clips. I'm going to move these pieces out of the way because we don't need them anymore. Slide these out of the way. Put the 505 away. And now we'll move over and I'll show you. I prefer to pin these. I think it just is a lot more accurate. I like how it works. So I'm going to start on one edge and I want to just do a general measurement. Make sure I'm keeping these borders at about 1/2 inch because that's what we originally wanted. They may feel like they want to climb up, but you want to just keep it about at that 1/2 inch. So just like we have done with all the other pinning, we're going to pin in a way that as we're putting this through the sewing machine, we're going to remove the pins as we go. So the pin needs to go point in the direction where the needle is going to be as you're stitching. So for this side here, we're wanting the needles to aim that direction because we're stitching along this line. And we're not turning this edge under. This is a raw edge, just like when we do binding with Cuddle, we leave that that edge raw. Okay, so we get this stitched down into place, and we're going to do a double row of pins. So we will do a second row out here just to keep this border in place. And this double row is actually going to go on the inside of the sewing machine. So you want it to clear your walking foot on the right side versus the left side, which is how we normally have it if you're doing, say, a throw or something like that. So for this circumstance, the double pinning is going to go within this border. And these ones here will stay when we're stitching. I'm going to continue to pin around, just measuring that we're about 1.5 inches. Just keep going all the way around. And we'll do that double row of pinning on this side too. Just want to keep everything as secure as we can to help us get the best final product. And again, that's why I like this little mini ruler. It's nice to have on hand for this type of thing. You're not pulling out the big guns just to measure this little border. Okay, almost there. Just got the one more edge, and we are going to stitch this whole border all the way around at once. If you are doing a really large self-binding blanket, you can certainly do one edge at a time. You can just do, depending on how many pins you have, you can do it in pieces. This one's small enough that we can just go all the way around. But a large self-binding blanket, the method is going to be just the same. If you wanted that, you know, the 2-inch border, you'd be measuring 2 inches. I'm measuring 1.5 because that's the border that we chose. Make sure that's there. And we have options for what we're going to stitch along this edge. You can use a straight stitch if you want. I don't prefer the straight stitch. I think the straight stitch can be a little tricky when you're doing a binding, and that is what this is. It's a self-binding, but it's a decorative edge. So there's you can either use a zigzag stitch or you can do the serpentine stitch. And generally with Cuddle, we prefer the serpentine stitch. And as we do it, we'll talk about why. And actually I'll do maybe 2 edges of this with the serpentine and then 2 edges with the zigzag, and you can kind of see what the difference is, and that might be helpful. Okay, so everything's all pinned up. Let's go to the machine and we'll start our stitching. All right, so we're going to be stitching this raw edge down. We're going to use a serpentine stitch or a zigzag to keep this in place. The key is that we want the left side of whatever the stitch is to catch the edge there, and then the other part to be zigzagging along the fabric. Let's try the serpentine first. And for this one, I'm using 4 millimeters long and 3.5 millimeters wide. On your machine, you can do things a little bit differently, but this is what I found works really nicely on this Bernina 535. So I'm going to try to keep this edge here lined up with where this walking foot ends right there. So I'm going to secure the stitch and then just start stitching along the edge, removing the pins as we go. We're keeping that edge real close to there where the walking foot is going in. With anything, I like to kind of lift up as I go and make sure nothing is dragging off the edge of the table. Just catching that edge. You can see this double row of pinning is going right by, which is fine. It's keeping everything in place, just like it's supposed to. And we're not in danger of running over this pin on this side or anything. So we're going to stitch to this edge. When we get down there, we're going to secure and then clip the stitch. Now I will see if there's any threads to trim. Trim real quick. And now we'll turn and continue that next side. With the serpentine, I like to stop, secure, and start again because it doesn't go around the corner quite as nicely as you might want it to with that stitch. So I like to just kind of meet at the edge, secure it, and then begin the stitch again. Once again, we're going to kind of feed this fabric through, making sure that left edge here is meeting that edge of the walking foot. It's a nice guide there to get it to go through. Keep going. We're going to go all the way to this edge. And once again, when we get to the edge, we're going to lock the stitch and then cut. I like to just take care of any little stray threads now, my nippers. Now let's try the zigzag stitch so I can show you guys the difference there. I'm going to start in the same place, switch to the zigzag, which on this 535 is number 2, and we're going to do it with a 5.5 millimeter wide and 6 millimeter long. See what that looks like. We'll secure the stitch and then just continue on, pulling the pins as we go. I'm going to keep that edge there. Nice. Now, depending on how skilled you are with the zigzag, you could just zigzag right around this edge. I'm going to try doing that. You could also do just what we did with the serpentine and release that stitch there and start on that side, but I'm going to try this. I think we went around that corner okay. Let's get this. And one thing I want to say is, so that nap does blow over quite a bit. You want to make sure you're actually getting this edge caught under and not just the nap. Because if you're just catching this nap, the edge could be missed and curled up underneath. So you're wanting to make sure that edge is what is hitting the edge of the zigzag on that left. So just one thing to note there is the stiletto is a great tool to be able to really feel where that edge is underneath all that pile. Coming around to the end here, I'm going to secure the stitch and then cut it. So now we're going to remove all the extra pins, that double row of pins. We'll take all those out, we'll trim any extra little threads that we see, and then let's talk about what the stitches that we used were, what they look like, and what the preference is going to be. Okay. So, just a little thread to trim. All right, so we've got our center here. Everything's been stitched along the border. Now with the stiletto, we can fluff up these fibers. And so right here, you can kind of see the edge of the actual fabric. So we'll want to fluff up this to get that pile to go back over so you're not seeing that edge of the fabric. That one, sometimes with hide, if you're getting a section where it kind of curls in, you might get that, but that can be all just covered over with some of this, with the fluffing of the stitches. So you would fluff kind of all the way around. Now on the back, this is where you're going to see some of the differences. So here is where we did the serpentine stitch, and here is where we did the zigzag. I like both. I think both are great. The serpentine one is generally preferred because it is, it doesn't really show off if you're kind of askew because it is sort of askew on its own. So it is nice to have that one, but the zigzag works great too. So if your machine doesn't do a great serpentine stitch, the zigzag is completely okay. So once we got all of this fluffed out, Here, you can just release all those stitches. You really wouldn't even be able to tell that it's a zigzag there. And you would go all the way around to complete your project. So now we're going to flip to the back, and this is where we did the serpentine stitch, and this is where we did the zigzag. And I think they both look great. Either way you want to go works for this project. The serpentine is generally preferred because it's zigzagging sort of on its own. So if you're slightly off or don't have that line exactly as straight as you want, it's already zigzagging itself. So this does this like subtle meandering. Whereas with the actual zigzag of the stitch over here, it tends to want to be more straight. So if you did drift off a little bit, it's more pronounced. So once you fluff up those stitches, really either one, you can't even see them. So it's all up to, personal preference, what you think looks best. And then you're done with your self-binding blanket, and you can do these in any size you want. You can do some bigger ones, anything you have as a centerpiece that you want to sort of put one of these faux frames around the edge. You can make it any size you want. We talked about making it bigger or smaller. We used the 1.5-inch border. We talked about how to make that bigger. This one I think is a 2-inch, and look how lovely that looks. I also use this for some cross-stitch projects that I like to do. You can use it with embroidery. I think it's a fun way to just sort of frame your project. And you don't really have to do any math. You do it all on that little card, and it's the only number you're using is the number of the width of the frame. So love this project. Hope you enjoyed doing the self-binding blanket with me. And you can check out the rest of our videos in the Cuddle Studio.